Hello everyone, and welcome back to episode 5 of the Just About Managing podcast with John Lloyd, Chris Dingle and myself, Lee Smith. So today we've got two topics as usual, one definitive work-related topic about just about managing, and then one sort of a different topic that could be personal, work-related, or interacting with something we've talked about within the sessions. So first off today, we're going to be talking about managing remote resources, whether they be direct reports or teams, and whether that be remote as in working from home within the UK or remote overseas. And hope that resonates with some of you listening today as well as we go through this. And the second part of the podcast, we're going to be talking about our first experiences of our first jobs prior to the corporate world. So that could be jobs when we were teenagers, heading into the corporate world, but just any experiences and the thoughts on that. I'm looking forward to hearing Chris and John's takes on those as we go through that. So to kick us off to start off, we're going to talk about managing remote resources or remote teams or remote people and what we've learned through that or what we've adapted and how we've changed our approach potentially versus the physical side of things. So John, do you want to kick us off with any of your thoughts on this one? I thought I'll throw it straight into you this time.
Thanks. You're so kind to me. I think I find this subject really interesting. I think when I was in my role as COO and we went through the whole COVID cycle, actually understanding how the remote working and remote management impacted in terms of culture, community, but also performance. And I think when we went through COVID, it was all a level playing field. And as we've kind of evolved out of it, what's happened is you've got everyone talks about the hybrid model now, and I think that some of the challenges in terms of what is culture and how do you maintain that and quality becomes challenging. My kind of main reflection coming into this as well is over the last 18 months working with businesses, not necessarily working out of London or other major cities around the world, there's a different perception, and that the problem you have is that the majority are working in the office 5 days a week, and the minority are working from home. And it actually when you've got the almost like the extremes and continuity, that causes problems in its own right, in terms because you start to get gaps in communication, as well as sort of misunderstandings, but also interestingly there remains a culture of actually, is the trust there? Are they really working? Which we would have seen back in the day in our old worlds, working in a bank or in financial services, and obviously things have evolved a lot. So coming into this conversation, as always, you sent the question out over our WhatsApp chat, and you go, my God, I've got so much to think about here and talk about. We've only got such little time. But and I've already strayed off subjects. You wanted me to talk about managing, but I just want to do a little bit of seed setting because I think it's important to be able to understand that perspective. So I'll shut up now and you and let one of the other guys talk for a minute.
No, thanks, John. I think it is great scene setting, though, as you say as well, because it's not just about the one-to-one engagements; it's about everything else that goes with it. And that trust piece, I think, is key there. How about yourself, Chris? What's your take on it and your thoughts on it?
Well, remote working ultimately is about working in different locations, but trying to get the same or like really good or even better performance out of the team or out of the collective or what you're trying to do, whatever it may be. and that remoteness can be across country, it can be within country. Bizarrely, this could also be within like different floors of the same building, because it's a nightmare to get up and down in the lifts at certain times of the day. Right, but you're all in the same team. So actually, the more I was thinking about this, actually, the amount of time that in my career I was actually working in the same location as my whole team, that became less and less. And it's actually a really positive outcome of COVID, actually, that now as a collective, as a race of people, we were all able to prove that results can be achieved, that we are grown ups, we can be trusted. And that's just such a fantastic opportunity for any manager or any leader to take advantage of. It's huge, right? This is going from being a master of kind of command and control and overseeing everything like an Uberlord, right? And becoming more a master of, John, as you said it, community and communication. So that's really, to me, the challenge here. We know what the benefits are. Less commute time, fantastic. Better work-life balance, flexibility. We get this right, focus, productivity. But the downside of not being in the same location, or even, being disconnected from the team, is reasonably obvious, right? Isolation, misalignment, silent quitting, even, right? And a lot of our communication links, right? We kind of, it's not just what's said; it's the body language, it's the, all those other tells, all that intelligence. And you're actually cut off from that. We only see this much. I mean, yeah, I mean, you can only see so much of the picture. You just can't read the way someone's walking into the room, the way they walk around the office, any of that stuff. And this is just, it's a huge challenge. I mean, how did you find it, Lee?
It was the reason. I sort of I asked the question actually, and it came up as the one to put out this week was, and this came about from a guy that you both know, which was Mo at HFBC, and had some catch ups with him at the end of as I was leaving, and one of the questions is, one of his favourite questions is, what's your unfair advantages? And it really got me thinking, both internally and now coaching. And one of them, for me, as I thought through that process, was because of personal circumstances here and home life and different things. I've worked from home for a lot of my career, so to the point when we've never met. I've never met either of you two face to face, unbelievably. No. And so, I started using what was Cisco Jabber. If you remember that, that would have been 15 years ago, maybe. And to the point you made there, John, actually, I was trusted to work from home by some really good managers who I had at the time, and who gave me that opportunity and then trusted me to carry on doing it. But what it gave me also then, as I thought about the unfair advantages, was it gave me an opportunity to learn how to build relationships over video and remotely. And so therefore it felt like when COVID hit, as you both said there, I think it's had some huge benefits in this front particularly. But when COVID hit, it felt like I had this bit of an unfair advantage because I had a 10-year head start on working with everybody remotely. And the bit that sort of really struck me, and I now use this in the coaching space as well particularly, but the bit that really struck me was, and probably because I was forced down that route in those early stages of it, is a lot of people use video for transactional conversation when it comes to work. And so we'll jump on a call, we'll talk about a subject, we'll drop off, and then we'll crack on with work. And what I was tending to do was, because of this early stage of it, and then through COVID particularly, was I was just having conversations over video. And it was the same conversations that you'd have over the drinks machine in the office, or over lunch in the office, or in the pub even. And what I tended to find then was that there was actually real benefit to those conversations when you were both remote and remote from the office, because you could actually have probably more open conversations than you've ever had with some of your team. because all of a sudden you're in an environment where you both feel safe, physically safe, and outside that work environment, where nobody else is listening at all. Even in the offices, there's a worry that you can hear through walls and things, and therefore you can have this completely open conversation. Things, if you play it the right way, you can get really deep and really understanding, as well as the transactional aspect. And I found that really interesting in that I think through the COVID piece, particularly early stages, people still use that as a transactional conversation. Then we start bringing to the coffee catch-ups and things that shape that out a little bit. And so I thought it was different take on it in a way. But
yeah, I found that going through the COVID period myself, which is with my bosses, they were, and I, both them and I, we were so busy back-to-back meetings all day that actually what we lost was that start of the day 10-minute chat and the end of the day 10-15-minute chat, sometimes half an hour, sometimes an hour, and that's what drove me to actually be back working in an office, because it actually made it more valuable. But the piece is fascinating listening to you, Lee, and I think that where you're very modest and what you talk about there is I think when people move to A, working remotely themselves, but B, managing people remotely, there's a real chunk there about good management hygiene. I think the reality is in an office environment, when everyone's in an office environment, they manage often through osmosis. So someone either overhears it, or you talk to them over the desk, or someone else tells them, "Oh, well, John just said, you can't do that," or "This is broken," or whatever. And I think when you're managing staff remotely, you have to be the proactive one in terms of driving the conversation. And I agree that there's two elements to that. There's the proactive one in terms of being consistent about the transaction information across everyone that's within your team. And that's how you do that consistently. But there's also this one-on-one dynamic, which isn't just about work. There is that, it's the mental welfare, it's the caring about the people, and that's I think what often gets lost. And I believe that when you get that right, that's when the trust builds, and I think that's when you get to that deeper level of dialogue, a bit like you're talking about in terms of the comfort, safe space as well. And I think it's all of those strands linked together that actually allows for that to work across multiple geographies and different levels of seniority and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think that it's not just one thing, but I do genuinely believe that you have to work harder as a manager to actually manage people remotely well, and to also achieve the right outcomes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, just building on that, guys. Right, I think this gives the manager, the organisation, an opportunity to be creative around their engagement. But they need to be intentional and manage this better and more deliberately. So structure is important because people are in different locations, so it's hard to understand when somebody's available. So structured time to share communication, to build two-way communication, check-ins, team meetings, individual time around careers, but also times around coffee is interesting. But if we look at the bigger kind of like topics or the themes that great teams have, great teams are able to feel valued, and it's hugely important that the office-based employees and the people who are working in the remote location, whether that's just a different office building but in a remote location, different part of the country, or from home, that they are both valued. All the parties are valued. So as the manager, you need to create access to those opportunities to connect, to create equity for people who aren't just, right near the London office or the head office or those things, and to create inclusion of those people. So celebrating, like, birthdays, events related to the team successes, but also creating that in a way that's the same for everybody. So there's not like people just dialing in. Certain celebratory events I can remember that we would do it and everyone would dial in from home, so it would be the same for everybody. Yeah, there was no difference. It was equally interesting. And then around that structure, how do you then ask a question? Well, you can put your hand up, but we just get better around the tech. So I think there also needs to be a bit of understanding here from anyone within the team and also within yourself, right? That this is hard. But if that trust will come, if people believe and they're being supported, right? I think, everybody understands this is not straightforward. But yeah, creating that is really interesting. I mean, what I personally found quite difficult was, being able not to pick up the spider senses of when you walk around the office, of when you kind of sense things aren't quite working, right? Or that kind of like buzz, the spark around somebody or individuals. That could be difficult. We used to use a phrase called coffee, right? So anyone could chat me at any time in the team, the word coffee, and that just meant they just wanted to chat. It could be a chat, it could be a problem, could just be they wanted to affirm something. And actually, you'd be really surprised how many people used to do that. I used to get each week 3 or 4 people message me the word coffee at the peak when, I was managing those big teams. Personally, I found that really interesting and useful, and it just took away a lot of that like hierarchy myth, right? So I just thought I'd share that one. But this is still difficult, and what we think good looks like now will be a very different story in like 5 years' time, 10 years' time. Let's see.
Completely. I think you touched on a point there as well, that key point there around equity, Chris, as you said. Like I say, it's creating that environment where whether people are working remotely or in an office or part of a team, that they feel they've got that equality in there with both the voice they've got, the space they've got, the time they've got in there. But I think, like I say, as you say, it's going to come whether we go to hybrid, back to the office or anything. There's always going to be that remote aspect, whether that be overseas teams, people working in different locations, people working from home. And I think it will evolve. There is no perfect out there again, is there? And what does good look like? But again, it's used for me. It's that piece of using that what we've learned through COVID, when everybody was working from home, and building those relationships then, and allowing people then the coffee chats, as you say, Chris, that people then could just drop in and be open and share and be vulnerable if they need to be as well. And then say, okay, what have we learned from that? Now let's take that back into, if we are, if we're talking about overseas teams potentially, but if it's overseas teams, overseas people in our teams there, taking those learnings and taking them into those conversations, we still create that safe space, we still create that open environment again, and that trust that comes with it. Spot on. Any other words of wisdom on the remote side of things before we move on from part one at all?
I would just say my wrap up. I don't know if it's word of wisdom, but mantra is, I think it's all good management hygiene. So it's a discipline around your one-to-ones, and making sure that covers all elements, not just a transactional element. And I think particularly as we've evolved into the whole concept of remote working, pretty much every team will always have a mix in most businesses now of whether there's people in or out of the office. And that proactive element of actually considering who's where, when, how they're included, how they're not, is so important. And the reality of life is you just got to work hard as a manager to actually, as Mr. Dingle likes to say, have those spidey senses. They've got to go into the digital as well as the physical, and that actually starts to really make that difference in terms of your team believing and following you then.
Definitely. Yourself, Chris, any final words of wisdom from yourself, Chris, on it?
No, that sounds good.
He's got the
Nice
spidey
one,
sensors
John.
in there, the virtual spidey sensors. I love it. I think that,
I'm
again,
happy.
we've all, I think all of us on here have had it, and it shows that you can make remote working work as a manager and for a team. And I think just one final thing I share is when I was in my last role in the corporate world there, my leadership team there was a team of fluctuate between 8 and 10 people. Again, I only physically ever met 2 of them face to face. And yet, hopefully, we had a great team culture there, and I still keep in touch with all of that team. So again, we can make it work. There was by no means perfect at all, but I think there's a lot to learn from, particularly from the COVID piece you've both mentioned there, as to how we take that forward in it. Excellent, great topic again there. That just wraps up the first part of the podcast. Thank you, guys, and stick around for part 2, everyone, when we're going to be talking about our first jobs and experiences from them. See you in a bit, everyone. Welcome back to part 2 of episode 5 of the Just About Managing podcast. And for the fun topic or non-direct management topic, we're going to talk about our first jobs or our first experience in employment, whether that be corporate or outside. So again, who wants to kick off on this one?
Can I just say, Lee, before we kick off, we have the new addition to the bookshelf on the back of your recommendation last week. Your James Kerr Legacy will be the next book on my reading list. I'm looking forward to this one, to actually sit down and start reading it. I'm almost finishing my current book, so I will hopefully have the same impact as it's had on you. So I'm looking forward to reading that. So
fantastic.
yeah.
Look forward to hearing about it as well. What your thoughts are on it, John?
Good. Go on then. Sorry, I interrupted your flow in terms
No, not
of,
at all. Who wants to share first on their first work experiences?
I don't mind. Do you want me to go first, Chris?
Yeah, go for it, John. Go for it.
So my first, it's interesting. I was reflecting about this, and actually into sort of modern life as well, and with my own family. And so my first job, 16. I've only had in my career, I could probably say that in terms of jobs, that I can stratify them into 3 chunks. So there's 16 to 18, and there's 18 to 50 something or other working in banking and finance, and then there's 50 something or other to today, being a business advisor, coach, and mentor. And so yeah, the first 2 years of my working life, I was at college. I was 16 when I started, and rather innocent and quite shy as well, actually. And I have no idea why or how I even ended up applying for it, but I applied to be a salesman in a furniture store, and it just did. And to be honest, it was a brilliant job. Everybody was significantly older than me, so I was very much the boy that they took and got drunk after a shift on a Saturday. But I was equally, I was able to hold my own, quite surprisingly, in terms of sales records on a Saturday, and I loved it, and I learned a lot from that in terms of self-confidence, and it actually forced me to go and talk to people off pat without knowing them. And my brother and I grew up with my brother being 18 months older than me. He still is 18 months older than me, funny enough.
Funny that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Coincidence.
And my brother he's a salesman. He's been a salesman all his career, and so he's at the 2 of us. He's on the extrovert scale. He hates silence. doesn't even like sitting in a pub on his own. He'll find someone randomly to talk to. Whereas growing up, and yes, whereas I'm touching into the introversion scale, but not too far. But growing up, I had someone who would do all the talking, would always go and introduce us to people or whatever. And so actually this was massively taking me out of my comfort zone doing this job, but it was probably one of the best things to actually happen to me, to actually force me, before I actually got into corporate life, to realize that actually I could go and talk to people, and I couldn't strike up a conversation and actually convince them that a load of flat pack furniture was the right thing for their bedroom, even if my designs were slightly dodgy. But bringing this, and at the end of the 2 years there, and I'd finished college, they actually offered me a job on their management training scheme. And at the same time, I had a job to go and work in a merchant bank in London. And ironically, at the time, they were offering me more money, quite a lot more money, to join their management training scheme. And I was actually really flattered by that. And it was the first time that I was good at it, and I'd been recognised for what I was good at as well. And it was a really mixed set of emotions in terms of where I go in, and I said before that my dad was always a very kind of wise guiding figure. He never told me, but he kind of always laid out the options, and it was having a conversation with him in terms of, okay, where does this take you to? And it's the reason for bringing it up to today. So my daughter's just spent 5 months in France as a chalet host, and she's absolutely aced it and come back. She had a really great time, not only socially but professionally. She did excellently. The quality of her work ladyship, you can't say workmanship, can you? Work personship was above and beyond, and and it's actually given her that same feeling, which is, I'm really good at this. Excellent. And there's a lot of sense of pride in that. And and now reflecting, having similar conversations to her, because so unsurprisingly, they've offered her a job to go back for another season. And it's actually, it's almost like a parallels of some of the conversations my dad had with me, which is how do you take those strengths and capabilities and realize that actually there's parallels of what you've achieved, and you can take that elsewhere into your career. So yeah, I was kind of waffling on a bit, but I think that I romantically look back at it because it was a good laugh, but actually on reflection, it was really foundational because it gave me that confidence to then go and work in London in the bank, and actually not just be wee shy John who was going to sit in the corner and be quiet. So yeah, there you go. That's me. Hope it's not that humorous, but hopefully some real life relevance.
Yeah, I think it's just great experience, isn't it? It's that diversity, as you say.
That's yeah.
And that full circle coming around.
It's a great story, John, right? And we all know where to go for a chaise longue or whatever to get you involved. What do you think of this? Is whatever. And I'm sure there's some other additional, there's like been some self-filtering of some of those stories related to like Doris and whatever from Soft Furnishings at 16. So I think you did a good job self-filtering that process.
I can actually remember once. Well, there was a couple of stories. I did when we opened our new store. We had a Z-list celebrity from Coronation Street come and open the store. And the local newspaper took a photo of me sat in a double bed under the covers with her. There you go. That's the. That's
have you still got it, John? Have you still got that photo?
No. Yes. Come on, John. You want to see that instead of that picture of that Land Rover in the back on there next week? Flash that up like the book.
I do have, actually, because obviously we've only recently moved house and we've had a massive clear out of stuff. And I found this box in the loft of like various old bits, and I've got my employee name badge from when I worked there, and also the clip-on tie, which is particularly fetching.
How much junk must you have in that? This house
Oh,
must be like, what? Ridiculous. That
Fantastic.
means, Lee, there's even more likelihood of him having that
It's got
picture.
to be
So
there,
don't
hasn't it?
get
It's
put
got to be
off.
there.
We will remember.
I know.
We will
If
remember.
any of John's family are listening and they've got a copy, please share it.
Yeah, WhatsApp, fantastic. And then we can, oh,
yeah.
guess what? Here he is.
With hair.
Can you recognise her?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Oh, excellent. Thank you, John. Thank you. How about yourself, Chris? What was your first experiences of work?
Oh, well, on one of our earlier podcasts, I spoke about some of my challenges of being first time manager at Tesco. All right. Now, there, I worked in every single department to make money, right? Whether it be like the freezer department, the coffee shop, on the tills, whatever. But that wasn't my first job. Okay. This is brilliant. The printer's printing off, so at least my son's doing some like homework while this is like getting done. You might see him in a minute. He might walk
Wondering.
past. So, but my first jobs were just like entrepreneurial things I would do in and around school. So I had a tape to tape machine. So I'd say this was my first job. That was suitably lucrative. Yeah, ZX Spectrum. They were incredibly valuable in terms of that, and tapes of whatever, Duran Duran, anybody, that kind of thing. Um, but the first real job, you could get a paper round at 13. So on my 13th birthday, I took myself off to the, and I wasn't tall, so I could just about see over the thing, and the bag was like about twice the size of me. But yeah, got a paper round, Lee. That was my first job. And I can remember, so my birthday's in October. I started in October and it was really cold. And I can remember this. It was on my first day was on a Sunday. And little did I really realise that Sunday's like the worst day to start a paper round because the paper bag's just so heavy because the papers are massive. So there's little me on this bike in the dark trying to deliver these papers, not knowing where any of the houses or any of the like things are. I can remember setting off on this bike at like, 6:10 with this paper bag, being really excited. And I fell over, yeah, on the pavement. And I can still remember that really vividly, of just like having to say to myself, get up, get up. You've got this. It's like 6:10, you can do this. Right. And I remember like skidding, getting up, I like grazed my knee, did whatever. And I did that paper round for 3 years, and then you could go and work at Tesco's when you were 16. So bang on 16, straight
Wow.
away, bye paper round. But the thing that the paper round and all those other things like washing cars as well, used to do that, and record tapes and other stuff, is that there's an often undervalued property in terms of people and in terms of what can get done. Well, how do you do this? How do you become successful? What do you do? And actually, there's one thing that's like open to everyone in all jurisdictions, everywhere. Hard work, trying your best is something that is open to everyone.
That's a great point.
And that certainly was kind of like on reflection when I was thinking about this before, like today, was just like, well, actually, the reason why, you know, you learn different things as you go along. But like, yeah, getting up, that was like hard earned yards, right? Or hard earned bruises and scrapes off the floor at like 13 on that paper round. But it taught me as much about myself as anything else. A bit like you, John, but in a different way. Around self resilience and put yourself out there and find out what you're made of. Yeah, you do a lot actually. But yeah, it's not a fun story, Lee.
Did it get
We'll
easier
get
over the
hosed
3 years?
out for
Did it
this
get
one.
easier carrying that bag though, Chris, as well?
Well, obviously, I got bigger and realised that get a bike with sensible tyres probably a good start if you're going to pay for it. But yeah, of course it does. And like everything, isn't it? The more you try, the more you go back again. That confidence comes from learning, right? Be confident enough to go for something, and then experience that learning, get back up and go again.
It's funny you say
Right?
about when you say tape to tape. So when from the age of 14 to 16, we lived in Kuwait, and I had 2 video recorders, and my side hustle. I used to make a lot of money renting videos. So we used to come home every holiday, and I would literally bring. Do you remember the old Adidas Sport holdalls?
Yeah.
One of them
Yeah.
full of videotapes, and we just constantly record stuff off TV over Christmas. Just random shit, and you'd come back with about 20 like 3-hour tapes full, and we lived on a compound, and our apartment was on the ground floor, and my parents got fed up with people coming to the door, and my windows had like sliding open windows, so it was like a hatch, and people would come and knock on the glass while I was supposed to do my homework to rent a video. And I think it was I think I charged, it was about £1 a time we used to rent them for, and then when that used to dry up,
Money.
we used to, when we used to actually rent movies which were all copied over there, and you couldn't actually rent original ones. And then if they're good enough quality, I became a connoisseur working out, probably a bit like you with the video games, Chris, in terms of if the quality's just not good enough, it won't copy, and then you can't rent it out because people complain. But those are the days.
Brilliant. There's probably a lot of
Yes,
people
John and
listening.
I have just hello listeners. It's Rodney and Del Boy here, right? And Lee, we can get some Trevor Francis tracksuit stories now from Lee. Or like, what else did they do? Oh, yeah, loads of wacky stuff, didn't they?
Yellow paint, yeah.
There's probably
Yeah,
a
brilliant.
lot of people
Fluorescent
listening.
paint. Yeah, that'd be brilliant. Come on, Lee, this would be great.
There's probably quite a lot of people listening there going, "What's tape to tape, and what's a video recorder? What is that?" But I remember the tape to tapes; they were brilliant, and a similar sort of time to remember recording the charts off the radio and trying to skip the bits where the adverts were or where someone was talking. Yeah, back in the days.
Come on then,
you.
Mr. Smith, give us your gem.
Mine was I had a paper round very briefly, but that didn't last very long for different reasons. I got stitched up on that one. Actually, that's a different story altogether. And then I had a few jobs. So similar to yourself, John, it was sort of that period from like 14 probably for me up to 18 prior to university. Then 18 to 21 at university, I didn't work there. I came back and worked, and then it was straight into corporate life, and then now. So actually, there's definite chunks in there. My first job, first jobs, was I live in a little village in Nottinghamshire, just on the outskirts, and there's only about 250 people in the village. And when I grew up, there was about 4 farms in here, and I always wanted to be a farmer. Mainly, I just wanted to drive tractors. My dad was a lorry driver, and I just loved driving. And so I learned to drive at 13, about 12 or 13. And always wanted to drive the tractor, so I'd go and work on the farms. I'd do anything. I'd literally do anything. And so some of the jobs I had there would be sweeping yards, and then I don't know whether you've ever seen this, but wild oat picking. So literally
walking through the crops.
Yeah, and it would just be me with a bag that was probably an old fertilizer bag over my shoulder with some baler twine in it, and then walking up and down the tram lines of the fields, these 100-acre, 200-acre fields all day, just looking across the crop and picking out the wild oats and putting them in the bag, picking out the wild oats, because the wild oats start to spread. They then spread through the whole crop and ruin the crop. I think they've advanced past this, I think, now.
Well, you say that. Well, last summer I was looking out the window here on a call, and suddenly I could see people in the middle of the field over there, and they were doing exactly
Were
that.
they?
They had their sacks over their shoulders. Yeah,
Excellent. Maybe there's still a career for me there then. If one else fails, I could be back.
There's hope yet.
Definitely. And it was, but that was one of those things where it was that, similar to your stories in a way. It was that there was a real need, there was a purpose to that, with regard to there was an end goal on that. That was making sure that crop was successful. But it was such a mundane job. But you felt like even at 13, at 14, I'd be dropped off in these fields and just walk, for hours and hours. But you felt like you were doing something that meant something. And then you were getting a paycheck at the end of it. And so I'd do the wild oat picking. Then we'd get on the back of the potato harvest, and I'd be picking out the bits of mud that came through on the grill at the back of the potato, being pulled behind this sort of massive machine, pulling the potatoes up and just taking out the bad ones and throwing them out in there. And then eventually progressed as I got older. I then, being desperate to drive, I took my tractor driving test at 16. So I had to go and do an emergency stop in a tractor doing about 10 miles an hour, where the instructor, the guy taking the test for me, stepped out in the road, because he wasn't allowing the tractor with me, stepped out in the road about 300 yards away to signify an emergency stop. I don't know why he didn't trust me at 10 miles an hour to stop more than 300 yards away. And then I progressed on to then doing the grain carting and things, and the potato carting in the tractors in there. But a great, I think, going back to, and it's only as you're talking, I think about this, but some of the lessons learned from that, particularly in that sort of environment with the farmers there, was problem solving. Because they, you look at the practicality of the guys I was around there, no problem was unsolvable. Mechanical, physical, anything you could just get to the bottom of, you'd fix with a bit of baler twine and a welder or whatever it may be. But it was constant problem solving all the time, because you never quite knew what was going to happen next up there. And it was fantastic. So that was a great lesson for me, both in practical working, and still to this day, I would love to be a farmer. And so I'd still love to go back out and do that again.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should say that, Lee, because I feel very proud and lucky to have the career that I have had. But and I always said I wanted a second career, but my 2.5 career ambition is actually to get my tractor license and actually work a whole harvest.
Excellent.
I'll be coming your way for tractor driving lessons, I think.
I think you can now. The reason I took my test was you can drive them on a normal license. Or actually, on our age, I think you can drive them on a normal license.
Can you? Okay.
I think you can. I took mine because I was 16. Obviously, I couldn't take my driving test until I was 17.
Yeah.
You can drive a tractor at 16 if you take a test for a tractor. And so that was my route into driving.
Which is bonkers, because even this day and age, you can still do that.
Yeah.
So you can drive a tractor with
anything on it.
Huge trailer, and you're 16. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was...
God, you two. Look at you. It's just like mad. Listeners, that's not going to be me. So you two can be Clarkson and Caleb. You choose who's who. Right? All right, but when the hops have been done, Lee, and there's the beer from your 2 bricks that you own in the pub down the road, count me in for the Harvest Festival bit. Yeah, definitely, I'll be there. Right, John, you can do deep drops back on the tractor over the field. If he doesn't know how to stop, Lee, you can just jump on there 10 mile an hour. It'll be all right, no problem.
Definitely. I must admit, it's one of those topics where when you talk about those sort of things, there were so many things that happened in that environment that were just stories and stories and stories of experiences I went through there that were fantastic. But I could talk for hours on it. But I think it's that, going back to your point, John, with the tractor driving, it's just that environment that has something about it, I think. That's just a freedom and just and being in nature piece as well, particularly.
Yeah, I agree.
Some varied educations in the working world there from all of us, I think.
Makes us all the much richer for it, though.
Exactly. Not financially.
Just caveating, that's all.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for sharing those experiences, both of you. Really good to hear. And again, I think what's great about this is none of us knew what we were going to talk about there, and none of us actually knew that background ourselves either.
No, yeah, I agree. I've enjoyed it today. It's been great.
Definitely. So, excellent. Well, thank you very much, both of you. Thank you for listening again, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Just About Managing. Remember to follow the podcast wherever you listen to it, whether that be on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, and on LinkedIn. He's been John Lloyd. He's been Chris Dingle. I've been Lee Smith. And you've been listening to Just About Managing. Goodbye, everyone.